I was 3 weeks postpartum, and I was asked, "What have you done for yourself today?" And I said, "I took a shower. That was my self care." And I was told, showering is a basic need and not self care. So, Jill then, 4 years ago, would have told you self care is, oh, go get a manicure or a haircut or treat yourself to a nice snack or something like that. Just something that mainstream tells you is taking care of yourself. Whereas today, my definition of self-care is something that brings me joy and rejuvenates my soul in a way and fills that cup so I can give more to others around me.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. I created this podcast to give you inspiration and let you know you're not alone in feeling stuck in midlife. I also invite you to join the Age Agitators Club for women, where we come together monthly to hatch our plans for making waves as we age. Being part of this community for women will remind you on a regular basis that you're not too old, and it's never too late to do that thing you've been thinking about. You can find more information at latebloomerliving.com/community, and I hope to see you there. Hello, my friend. Mother's Day is coming. Mother's Day is coming, and today's podcast episode is actually going to be part 1 of 2 with 2 different guests, because what I want to talk about is the idea of motherhood. And this is going to be an intergenerational conversation about motherhood, because my guest is Jill Olish, and she is definitely younger than me. In fact, she's told me before that she feels too young to be an age agitator. So, but I would like to talk to her today about the topic of motherhood, because that is a very important topic to Jill. She is a first-time mom and entrepreneur. She has a toddler who she is raising while stepping into the shoes of entrepreneurship at the same time. She became a mom and entrepreneur at the same time in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And she experienced postpartum anxiety and rage that surprised her. And she never would have expected that this was going to happen to her. And through her own journey, she realized how challenging this could be for other moms. And so she ended up founding an organization called Mama Outspoken to help moms find their voices and be heard, advocate for themselves, and spread awareness for motherhood transitions. She has a weekly segment for mama entrepreneurs on the live stream Good Morning Entrepreneurs, which I also contribute to. I talk about later in life entrepreneurship, and she talks about being a mom entrepreneur, which I'm just going to say right now, when my kids were little, there was no way in any way, shape, or form that I would have considered becoming an entrepreneur at that time. I was overwhelmed with motherhood and all the things that came with it. I could barely handle the going back to work full time, much less trying to start a business. So I'm already bowing down to Jill right away. Besides that, Jill is a host of the Mucked Up My Self-Care podcast with her partner, Linda Bonney. She's a featured author in Your Purpose is Calling, Stories from New Authors, The Story Behind the Story, which came out of a new author intensive. It's volume 3 of that series. And she's just amazing. Jill is part of a business mastermind community that I am in as a participant, but she keeps the whole ball rolling behind the scenes and is like, seriously, I want to be Jill when I grow up. Hi, Jill. Thanks for being with me today.
Yvonne, you are so sweet with all the words that you say. Oh man, thank you so much for having me today.
I am so excited.
So happy.
Yeah. Wow. So where do we start, Jill? let's start with your motherhood journey, I think. What on earth made you decide to start your own business?
It's as you were introducing me, Yvonne, and you said that you don't think that you would have been able to have done, uh, even dove into entrepreneurship when you had your littles, but I didn't see another way.
Mm.
I am a funeral director by trade. I went to school for that. I was not in the business while I was pregnant, so I didn't see a way to go back to it with the baby.
Mm.
It's very demanding. Hours are on call 24/7. That was just not something I wanted to do.
Mm.
I had been working at the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles at the time, which was also a demanding job. And I was
Mm-hmm.
actually in line for a promotion before I went on maternity leave.
Of course you were.
Could have gone back and gotten the promotion, but that would have meant 10-hour shifts,
Mm-hmm.
5 days a week, all kinds of craziness. And I did not want to put a 3-month-old into daycare.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt my limited options were super limited for what I knew and loved to do. And I figured, well, what else could I do and work from home that wasn't some kind of a scheme like how we all get kind of roped into? So,
Yeah.
I did get roped into a few different things, but I found a course to be a virtual assistant. I didn't think that I'd build a business aside from that. I thought I would just have a few clients that I could just do what I needed to do for them. And that would be it all. And then,
So it was a virtual assistant business. So you didn't go and become a virtual assistant and work for like one of those agencies that exists where you were part of, you're part of the agency and they farm you out to people. This
correct.
was your baby.
Yep. I
Uh-huh.
created Jill virtual assistants. I went out, I found 4 clients, and they were actually all doulas, which a doula is um, how do I put this? It's somebody who assists a family in their birthing or postpartum experience, like a coach in a way. And I think of it as a coach for the dad or the birthing partner and how to advocate for the birthing person. So I wanted to work with people who helped me in my motherhood transition. And that was like absolutely perfect. I worked for 3 different doulas, and I also found who we all know and love in the community, but Princess Kim White was my first client that was not a doula in this business
Wow.
industry. And she is the one that said, you have a bigger purpose than just working for other people. You need to go after that because I can see this call there for you to help other moms. So that's how we got started with Mama Outspoken.
Amazing. Okay. Wait, I have to ask a question. I have to ask a question. So Kim was your first client who was not a doula. Kim lives in Texas
Yeah.
or was living in Texas, at least at that point, right? And here you are on the East Coast. So how did you and Kim find each other?
Oh, so the virtual assistants course that I went through, it's 90-day VA, loved it, absolutely loved it. Taught me everything I needed to know on all the different kinds of niches that I could get into to build my own business, figure out what kind of things I wanted to do for a client. And with that program, there was like a job board, a job listing board. And
Ah.
um, the woman who does the class, Esther, she has it all in this Facebook group, and there's just post after post after post of all kinds of people looking for virtual assistants in their businesses. And this one tiny little post was up there with nothing special, just Princess Kim White looking for
Was it
da, da,
listed
da,
as
da. And
Princess
that was
Kim
it.
White?
And it
Really,
was.
literally.
It was. I questioned, like, why is this email Princess Kimberly Ann White at Gmail? I'm like, am I crazy for sending an email to someone who labels themselves as a princess? And I think I am crazy, but it has created this beautiful experience between
Wow.
her and I. And I mean, we're going on 4 years this year, and working in a relationship in business together. So
That's amazing. And she saw
yeah,
something in you beyond what you could see for yourself.
yep,
That's a blessing. It's a
definitely.
blessing to have that person. I have to say that I know that. I know how that is. I was working at a job. Oh my gosh, that whole thing when you were talking, sorry, I'm all over the place. I'm a pinball right now. But when you were talking about the schedule that you would have had to follow if you had taken that DMV job and how demanding that would have been, and then you've got to hand over your 3-month-old into daycare. I actually had to face that point when I had my second kiddo. I had been working part-time from home. I found this very strange job that let me do like it was flexible. It was, but it was a weird job, but I was able to work when Spencer was a baby. It let me work when he was napping. And it was just right. We could just get by while my husband was in grad school. Right. And then when I had my second kiddo, and between two different nap schedules, it just got to be too much. And I ended up having to go back full time. And it was misery, misery. I felt like I was working to put my kid in daycare.
Yeah.
And I did not like that. And then the job that, long story short, I ended up in a customer service job. And because I've had a weird career, like being a theater person leads you into lots of different jobs and a weird resume that nobody knows what to do with you. Nobody knows what to do with you. And so I'm good at customer service, but it's a miserable job
Yeah.
talking to people who are having problems all day. Blah, blah, I was just like, um, and when I was ready to leave that job and when I really started looking, I found another job. And something about the guy that hired me, he saw something in me that was beyond what I could see for myself, and there was going to work for him, I think launched me into feeling confident enough to eventually go full time in the photography, which I had been dabbling in, little side thing. And I thought, because all I wanted to do was have a business that gave me the flexibility to be with my kids.
Yeah.
And so that you saw the writing on the wall much sooner than I did. Congratulations for that.
But I was in the same boat. Like I couldn't understand how I would pay my paycheck. I might as well just sign my paycheck over to a daycare center. Like
Right.
that just didn't make sense to me. Like what I would have earned would have literally just gone right out the window. So why not stay home, get what I wanted out of having a family, to be with my family, as well as work during nap times. And that's what ended up having to happen. I worked during nap times and a few hours at night until I needed to shift a few things. And he was old enough for me to put him in daycare or get someone to come over for a few hours a day to help. And I felt comfortable doing that after a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did the postpartum depression start to get hold of you?
I think actually, so there's so many different terms now than what I believe we have been led to believe with postpartum depression and anxiety. And they actually consider a lot of it to happen perinatal. So that's during pregnancy and even pre-pregnancy as you're getting ready to become pregnant. And
Hmm.
I don't think I had depression or anxiety while I was pregnant, but the concerns for it started to make themselves aware. I did not feel a bond in my pregnancy with my baby boy as he was growing inside of me. And then we had a very traumatic labor and delivery experience, which I think set myself up for the very drastic changes in my mood as
Mm.
soon as I was left alone with a baby that I had no idea how to take care of. So baby blues is a real thing, but it does lend itself to confusion, in my opinion, to what is baby blues and do I actually have postpartum depression and anxiety? And I was 3 weeks postpartum with my son who was keeping me up most of the night because he was unable to nurse for the appropriate amount of time because he was exhausting himself from the effort put into it because his mouth was not working right. He
Mm.
had what they call oral ties. So his lip and his tongue were tethered tighter than what would allow him to nurse well. So nobody could find it. We asked since day one when he was born if he had these, just because we knew it would be an issue if he did have it. And everyone
Hmm.
told us, no, 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 he's fine. He'll be fine.
Really?
And it was most nights we could not get him to nurse for more than 10 minutes at a time before he'd fall asleep because he was so exhausted to find out that he
Oh.
had a lip tie, a tongue tie, and 2 cheek ties. So we had to have those corrected. So after that, our nursing went so much more smoothly, but I was still so dysregulated in my emotions and my hormones that it was super hard. Like that didn't fix me. Fixing him and his nursing capabilities did not fix me right away. So it was a lot of figuring out, well, how do I work on me now? Because he's better, he's doing great. Um, so it was very early on, as soon as 3 weeks. And then I made the phone call to my friend who is the co-founder of the Postpartum Resource Center of New York, where she helps families all across New York State with the same stuff that I went through. And she got me in touch with a lactation counselor who helped me figure out that he had the ties. We figured out a treatment plan, worked with amazing specialists to get his muscles in his mouth working better and compensating for the work that we had to put in and the healing that needed to be happening after the surgery he had to have. So it was a blessing to have her in my corner because it helped pave the way for my healing from the rage, the depression, and the anxiety.
Wow. Wow. How hard. How hard. His little thing couldn't latch properly,
Yeah.
right? Or not, it's not just the latching, it's like it was
It
it a
would,
was it hard for him to latch? Is that what it
he would
was?
be able to latch, but the actual sucking motion was what was difficult. And then it actually affected the way the milk would go down his throat naturally. So
Yeah.
there's this whole thing. And at one point, we thought he was so strong because he was able to lift his head up by himself. And a 3-week-old baby cannot hold their own head up. Not at all. But we were like, oh my gosh, look at him. He's picking his head up. And it actually was because his cranial muscles in the back of his neck into his head were so tight because of the ties in his mouth.
Oh
Just
my goodness.
pulling it all back made him just have a stiffer neck. So we actually had a chiropractor that we worked with to help
Wow.
loosen those muscles and adjust him, and a myofascial specialist therapist that would help with exercises to get his tongue to almost extend out further than what it was doing so it would compensate with the ties. And
Wow,
it
that's
was,
real
yeah,
specialization. How do you do that with a baby? That's amazing.
it was awful to go through. It was heartbreaking because this child did not want us playing around in his mouth. It
Of
was
course not.
like,
Yeah.
oh, it was the
Oh,
worst thing ever. It felt like to go
that
through.
is a huge amount of stress. So, wow, I mean, yeah, no wonder this threw you off, and not to mention anything else that was going on for you hormonally to begin with. To have that as a challenge would be a whole next level extra thing.
Yeah, I
Wow.
don't wish it on anybody, but you need an opinion on it, let me know because I've got amazing people that are in my corner that I can share.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. How old was he when when you did start the virtual assistant work?
He was actually 3 months old by the time that I got my first client. So I started a few weeks. I was very newly with Declan. I think he was born June, the end of June. And if I'm not mistaken, by the end of July, I had started my course. And the the course is supposed to be able to be done in 90 days, but it's at your own pace. So you could take longer or you can do it in a week, depending on how much time you want to devote to it. So I did it. And by October was when I had my first client. So I did it in 3 months.
Wow. Amazing. That's
Yeah.
sheer force of will right
I,
there.
it really, but I had at the time, it like when he was between a week and 3 months old, he wasn't doing anything, just laying in my lap. And it's funny because I have tons of pictures of him just like napping in my lap and me on my computer, reaching over, just watching these courses. So by the time 3 months came around, though, he was reaching for everything. I couldn't grab
Oh,
a pen and a paper. I could, like, he'd kick me out of so many things on my computer because he'd just be like, right to the computer. So this kid was working at 3 months old with me.
oh my gosh.
So it was definitely a challenge in figuring out, well, we got to shift some things around. How are we going to work when I need to work and I don't need him interrupting my day? So
Yeah.
that posed a lot of pressure on me, and because I'm a workaholic, like I want to work. I don't do well sitting idly.
Yeah. At what point did you realize you needed help?
um Aside from my call for help for the, in 3 weeks in, I can't remember exactly the time frame, but we were in his room. I tried to work in his room for a quiet time, let him play on the floor, and then me sit in the rocking chair and work on my computer on a tray table. It didn't work out, so I gave up. And then he was he was not crawling yet. He was still on his belly, but mobile, like he was moving all over. So we went back in that evening and I got so frustrated. I don't remember from what, because in a moment of panic, you don't really always remember what led you there. But
Yeah.
I know I got just so overwhelmingly frustrated with just something that I kicked the tray table across the room in a moment of rage, just like, nope, this is not happening right now. I'm done. I scared the crap out of everybody in the room. My husband never looked at me at that way that he did that
Mm,
moment.
mm,
And um my baby boy cried, but he also wanted me at the same time,
yeah.
which made me feel like a complete monster. Like, how can
Yeah.
you still want me when I just caused this panic inside of you from like not knowing what the heck just happened? So that was my first key, that there was an issue with rage. And then it needed to be worked on.
Yeah. Wow. Somewhere along the line here, you find yourself your four clients, you're working. And at what point did you feel like you had learned something and wanted to be able to help other people? And I guess what I'm asking is, when did you start Mama Outspoken and how did that come about?
Let's see. I think it was December of 2020. So I think it was around the same time-ish of knowing I needed help with the rage. But primarily it was definitely leading up into that when I was in a support group. It was called fourth trimester support group. So there's 3 trimesters in your pregnancy. Your fourth trimester is the first 3 months after in your postpartum period. So one of the motherhood wellness facilities near us had a group for moms in their fourth trimester. And that was when I had been told this lovely phrase of, it's not normal, but it's common. All the things that we were all in there for, needing support for, were not normal things, but commonly felt or experienced by so many moms. So my lack of feeling of a bond with my son in the beginning was the first time I heard that anybody else had ever felt that they didn't have a bond with their child right away.
Hmm.
And knowing that was that, if I didn't know that, how many other moms don't know that? So
Right.
I felt that I had something to share. I had a call from the woman who I called out to, and she's like, you need to tell people about your experience, especially being in the middle of a pandemic and isolated and
Mm.
feeling these things and all, like, just one thing after another. She's like, you have the ability to share. And I think that you would be exactly the person to share that with, like whoever you can reach out to. So that's where the call for a book came out. And I think that's also where, things have, whoever was a visionary in my life has called out on me to start something like Mama Outspoken.
Wow. 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 What a journey. What a
Yeah.
journey. Now you're full on out in the world doing this work, which is amazing. And you've extended it into having a podcast with Linda
Mhm.
Bonney, who is also mom to multiples
Yes.
and littles. And again, both of you, I just watch how you're able to navigate motherhood and entrepreneurship at the same time. And I just am wowed by both of you.
She
By both of you.
inspires me all the time because we're on opposite sides of the world. We're meeting her morning and my evening and vice versa. And
Yeah,
we're,
because she's in Tasmania. Yeah,
yeah,
we haven't even talked about that. So you've got really she's in the future. She's in a
yes,
whole other day ahead of you,
yeah.
right? Oh my gosh.
So
Oh my
it's
God.
just like, how are you doing this? If I'm barely surviving, it feels like with just one, I don't know how you were doing this. And she, entrepreneur, podcaster, writer, author, like all of the above. And I'm like, how? I don't like, I aspired to be like you, like to be able to manage that all. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So the title of your podcast is Mucked Up My Self-Care Podcast.
yeah.
And um I really love that the self-care seems to be front and central for you guys and the idea of mucking it up because we do, right?
So
It's
do.
oh my gosh, when you're a mom and you've got all the demands and you're an entrepreneur. I mean, entrepreneurship, there's nothing, first of all, there's nothing like motherhood to point out all of your shortcomings and bring out all your strengths. And the same thing with entrepreneurship. It'll point out
Yes.
all your shortcomings and bring out all your strengths and, and develop, and it helps you develop your strengths. But you've got to take care of yourself in the midst of either of those things. Super important. And so do you guys just sit around and talk about your fails on self-care?
It's it's fantastic. And we've grown so much. So what came out of it is really we had no idea what self-care was when we first needed to have self-care in our lives. Before I was pregnant, sure, I did this and that and the other thing, but never like, I'm going to go do some self-care today because I didn't know that I needed it. And
So
then,
can you define self-care for me? I love that you're saying that. What do
yeah.
you think self-care is now that you are where you are in your life?
So self-care is giving back energy to me where it's leaked out and by doing something that brings me joy. So I originally thought this was my first conversation about self-care back when I was in my phone call when I was 3 weeks postpartum and I was asked, what have you done for yourself today? And I said, I took a shower. That was my self-care. And I was told showering is a basic need and not self-care. So Jill then 4 years ago would have told you self-care is, oh, go get a manicure or a haircut or treat yourself to a nice snack or something like that. Just something that mainstream tells you is taking care of yourself. Whereas today, my definition of self-care is something that brings me joy and rejuvenates my soul in a way and fills that cup so I can give more to others around me. So that's going to be alone time in quiet or grounding outside, walking through the grass and really like soaking up that energy through the earth. For me, I'm a religious person. It's also going to church and spending time there in meditation or in worship because that's where my heart sings is when I'm singing. So that's the difference now for me and my definition of how self-care is. And that's what we do on the podcast, is really go into, well, what are your expectations? And can you do self-care with other people? How have you mucked up your self-care? And what are ways to really incorporate it into your life better? All kinds of things just surrounding it. And it's just a great conversation that Linda and I get to do. And the podcast itself has become self-care for us and just having conversations.
Love that. I love
Yeah.
that so much. Yeah, it's funny, I'm 55 years old. How old are you again?
35.
35. Okay, so we've got 20 years between us. It's so funny. I'm still figuring out the self-care thing. And I had kids later in life. I was 35 when I had my first. And um so now I have one in college and I have one that is a teenager at home. And I still want to be available to him at home at the drop of a hat. Even though he doesn't need me,
Mhm.
it's still, I want to be available. I want to be around. I want to be a place where his friends can come so that we have an open home for that, right? It's hard to balance self-care with trying to be available all the time,
Yes. Oh, yes.
right? So what I found for myself as I was approaching 50 was, oh, really the only time that's a guarantee for me is in the morning before he's up.
Mm-hmm.
I am finding that self-care for me is about learning how to manage my mind when I'm doing all the things and taking little breaks when I need to, so that if I find I'm a person who tends to grind, and I'm also a workaholic. I'm with you, girl. And in the grind, I tend to I overbook, and then I feel overwhelmed. And at the end of every day, I can look back and go, well, I know I did a lot of stuff today, but I can't tell you what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And none of it felt like enough. I almost every day I get to the end of the day and think there are still 50 million things to do. And I didn't get this done. And it's not, I did this, I did this, I did this. It's, I didn't do this, I didn't do this, I didn't do this.
Yep. Oh, I feel
And more and more, I'm finding that it's a mindset thing that I still, at the age of 55, have to learn, is how to, and it's why I'm looking at playfulness as living playfully at any age. How can I get a more playful attitude towards the work I'm doing? Because it's all work that I want to do.
right.
And then I forget that I want to do it when I'm in the middle of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find a challenge with that?
So I have to say, Yvonne, you have been an inspiration with introducing playful into probably not just my vocabulary, but my world, along with a lot of the things that we've been learning in the My Sexy Business community to have a business that we own and that doesn't own us.
Mm-hmm.
So I send my son to daycare from, the midday, morning to early afternoon. And then I'd try to work again after I got him home. I'd try so hard and I had to stop and realize that this is my time with him. If I don't stop and be playful with him and really be involved in what life is with him, then what am I doing all this for? Like, I have my set hours for work. I do that. I started waking up almost 2 hours early so I could have my alone time in the morning. It's when I read my Bible. It's when I do a little bit of work that is able to be done in a quieter time where I know he's not up yet or I have a few meetings. But come 3:30, that's Declan time. That's family time, unless I have meetings or whatever else scheduled. But I had to stop and be like, you know what? We're going to be fully invested in this time. And that's how I'm going to incorporate self-care for both of us. if I really need to go get some grounding in, we go outside. I'm picking up dog poop in the backyard and in my bare feet walking around in the grass, and he's playing with his toys, and we're going to make it an afternoon. Or we go to the library
So I
because
love what you, sorry, I'm interrupting, but I
you're
love what
good.
you just said. I'm picking up dog poop, but at the same time, you're taking care of yourself because you're grounding. You've got your
Yeah.
feet off and you're touching for anybody who doesn't know what grounding is, like it's literally like letting your feet be on the earth. And there's an energy thing that you can pull from that. And that's like a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But you're fitting in self-care while you're picking up dog poop.
Yeah.
And you're playing, and your son is with you, and it's together time, right? And what you're doing there is exactly what I'm talking about. It's a mindset shift from like, here's an example. If I go to the grocery store and I find myself at the grocery store at night, sometimes I'm like, it's kind of fun to be here at the grocery
Right.
store at night. Like, it's not as busy, and they're playing some music. Oh, this is a pretty good song they're playing.
Different air to it. Yep.
Yeah. And my attitude towards the shopping affects the whole experience, right?
Mhm.
Like it really is our attitudes that we bring to everything.
Yeah.
There's an element of self-care that we can bring to every moment if we want to.
For sure. I don't think I would have had that shift if Linda and I had not started this podcast, because it was more of a chore. Oh, I have to go get some self-care. My husband would be like, you haven't
Right?
done something for yourself. Go do it. I'm like, but I don't really want to. Like, that's a lot of work. So I shifted how it means something to me. And it means something to me by including my son, because it's almost more work to go find him something else to go do while I go do what I want to do. Instead, we can just do it together. So it's filling both of our cups. So why not?
I love that take on it. Wow, that's good. That's some extra good judo there, Jill. But it's true too. Like I taught, part of the playfulness for me, I love paddle boarding. I love roller skating. But there are days when I make myself feel bad for not going roller skating. It's like, well, girl, that's the whole point is to go because it's fun. It should never be a have to.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that to yourself? But we do that to ourselves, right? So funny how you can turn anything fun into not fun just by
Just a little bit of a unadjusting of our mindset. Yeah.
or flip it around and turn anything into fun because of the way you decide to look at it. It's all about deciding, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at the time and we probably should wrap up, but I could talk to you for forever about all of this. What are you excited about that's coming up, first of all?
Ooh, wow. Okay, so Mother's Day is centered around two big things, and that's the anniversary of our podcast. So Mucked Up My Self-Care was born and released on Mother's Day in 2023. So
Wow.
super exciting that that's happening, as well as the release of my book and self-titled, so Mama Outspoken. It's about my history of pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, labor, delivery, and healing through all the fun stuff.
All the things. And so the book is coming out. That's so exciting. First of all, congratulations on a year of podcasting, because that is a huge accomplishment to get to that first year mark. A lot of podcasts start and a lot of podcasts fade. And I'm so excited and happy for you guys for making that 1 year mark. And in a book in the middle of it all.
I know. Which
Jeez,
also,
lady.
a lot of things are following the book. I don't have the answers to what those are just yet, so stay tuned. But the book is definitely coming out.
And people would find you on mamaoutspoken.com. Is that the best place?
Yep,
Yeah.
mamaoutspoken.com. Socials are the same, Mama Outspoken. But yeah.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. And if you're driving right now while you're listening, don't worry. You can always go to latebloomerliving.com and find everything you need there. It'll be in the show notes. And I will make sure to get links to the podcast there for you and everything else that people can come and find you if they know somebody. I imagine if you're listening right now, you're probably past childbearing age, chances are. But if you have a daughter, if you have a niece, if you have anybody you know who needs support pre or postpartum, you got to check out Jill's offerings. This is good stuff you're doing in the world, Jill. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Yvonne. This was a pleasure chatting with you. I'm so excited
Me
to have been
too.
able to do this.
Me too. So awesome. Thank you. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jill Olish as much as I did. I love Jill. I definitely want to be her when I grow up. And I feel so lucky to have friends in my life like Jill who are not the same age as me. I have older friends. I have younger friends. And I learned something from each and every one of them. I also hope that this has you thinking in new ways about what self-care is. It's a really good question, I think. What is self-care for you? Because I think it's different maybe for everybody. We've all been sold, I think, a bill of goods about what self-care looks like. And a lot of it has to do with buying things or, getting massages or, some sort of commerce attached to it. But what is it that fills you with joy? That gives you energy? It's just something to think about. And as Mother's Day approaches here, I have to wonder if you have a copy of my book yet, In Full Bloom, A Guide to Aging Playfully. If you don't, drop a hint or two to the loved ones in your lives. And if you're a mom, see if somebody might get you that for Mother's Day. All right, that is all. If you want more information about Jill, feel free to check out the show notes. I'm going to have links there to her Mama Outspoken information, as well as the podcast that she does with Linda Bonney. You can just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and look for episode 185. 185. Wow. Sometimes it blows my mind when I say these podcast episode numbers out loud. Next week, I'll be back with another guest to talk about intergenerational motherhood stories. And I can't wait. Come on back next Wednesday. Until then, stay safe and well. Talk soon.